True silence is strength, but the silent treatment is a game, and games leave scars. Let that sit in your chest for a moment, my friends. Let it sting and let it echo, because too many people are calling it power when it's really just punishment dressed up in silence. Before we go any deeper, take a moment to reflect on this. What we're about to uncover is not just knowledge. It's truth with substance. Imagine this. You're standing in front of a glass mirror. On the outside, it's spotless, calm, and cold, but behind it, cracks are forming. You can't see them at first, but every time you swallow what you want to say, every time you go quiet just to make them feel the silence, a new crack appears. Not in the mirror, but in you. One day that thing shatters. That's the kind of silence we need to discuss, the one that appears calm on the outside but is chaotic on the inside. It pretends to be stoicism, but it's really just fear and control wrapped in a poker face. We've been fed the idea that silence is always power, that if they ghost you, you should ghost them harder. If they pull away, you pull away faster. Don't text back, don't call, make them sweat. Sure, sometimes silence does shift the dynamic, sometimes it makes them think, but let's be honest, that's not always strength. Sometimes it's strategy, and sometimes it's you playing mind games with your own heart. Here's the truth. Silence isn't the scam. When weaponized, silence is not stoicism. It's not about staying quiet to punish someone. It's about pulling back to protect your peace. It's not meant to be used as a sword. It's meant to be a shield. But in dating, we twist it. We use it to test people, to trap them, to see if they'll chase, beg, or apologize. If they don't, we spiral, we break, and we blame them for not reading between the lines of a silence we created. Let me hit you with a quote you won't forget. Silence used to center yourself is strength, but silence used to confuse someone else is manipulation in disguise. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but going silent worked for me. They came back. Sure, they did. But did they come back because they respected you or because they feared losing access to your silence? That's the difference. When your silence is about you, your healing, your clarity, your boundaries, it's sacred. That's stoic. That's growth. But when your silence is about them, designed to shake them up, to make them feel what you're too afraid to say out loud, that's not strength. That's emotional blackmail without words. And don't get me wrong, it's tempting. We've all done it, gone quiet to make them notice, posted that I'm unbothered story, waited for the "Are you okay?" text. But deep down, we weren't calm. We were boiling in silence, hoping someone would hear what we didn't have the courage to speak. Here's your wake-up call. Silence that hurts you is not healing. Silence that manipulates others is not maturity. Real stoicism is calm, not cold. It's centered, not calculated. So today, let's take back the truth. Stop using silence to test people. Use it to transform yourself. Stop calling punishment peace. Stop calling control composure. Silence doesn't have to be a game. It can be a gift. Say it with me. Silence is for peace. Write it in the comments. Let it sink in and show them. Show yourself. Show the world. Stay with me because we're just getting started. Number 1, silence is stoicism, but the silent treatment is a performance. Stillness is strength, but pretending to be unbothered is a role, not reality. Let that cut through your illusions, my friends, because there's a silence that heals, and then there's a silence that hides. Too many people are silent not because they're at peace, but because they're scared. Picture this. You're in a theater, curtains drawn, lights dimmed, and on stage stands someone frozen, stoic, composed, unmoving. But backstage, panic, wires tangled, props broken, people running in chaos, trying to hold the illusion together. That's what many today call strength. They've turned silence into a performance. In dating, we've flipped this theater of silence into a strategy book. If I don't text, they'll miss me. If I ignore them, they'll chase. If I go quiet, they'll finally realize what they lost. You're not healing, you're hoping. You're not being strong, you're staging a scene. I get it. Silence can feel safe. It feels controlled, like a way to protect yourself without saying too much, without risking rejection, without showing your cards. But here's the thing. If your silence is really about them and not about you, it's not stoicism. It's strategy. And strategy in love can quickly turn into self-sabotage. Let me break this down. There's a difference between withdrawing to reconnect with yourself and going silent just to make someone else feel it. The first is grounded. The second is a gamble. You're not really centering yourself. You're centering them. You're not in control of your emotions. You're just trying to control theirs. Ask yourself, why do you do it? Why do you feel like going quiet is the only way to be heard? Maybe it's because the last time you spoke up, you were called too much. Maybe someone told you expressing how you feel is drama. Perhaps you've been left on red before, and now silence feels safer than speaking first. You've learned to weaponize your quiet because you thought your words made you weak. But my friends, listen closely. That's a lie. A deep one this world keeps feeding you. They told you silence equals power, but they never told you the price of that power. The coldness, the disconnection, the emotional confusion you create for them and for yourself. You think you're protecting yourself, but all you're doing is performing strength while starving your soul. Let me give you a quote that hits like thunder. Power that depends on another person's reaction isn't power. It's a performance on pause. You go silent, but you're watching. You don't message, but you check their status. You pretend to be unbothered, but every time your phone lights up, your heart skips. That's not stoic, that's scared. And that's okay, because we've all been there. But here's your wake-up call. If your silence needs an audience, it's not real. If it only exists to create a reaction, it's not healing you, it's holding you hostage. I know it's hard to hear because silence can feel like control, especially when everything else feels uncertain. It feels like you're winning, like you're the one who pulled back first, like you're holding the power. But power over someone else's emotions isn't peace, it's pressure. And one day that pressure cracks you. You think going quiet will make them see your worth, but your worth was never meant to be proven by silence. It was meant to be honored by presence. That's what true stoicism is. It's not about playing hard to get. It's about being hard to shake, not because you don't care, but because you care about your own peace more than their attention. Let me ask you this, my friend. What's the point of getting them to chase you if the version of you they're chasing is wearing a mask? What's the point of being missed if what they miss is a performance you can't keep up forever? You deserve more than that. You deserve to be loved as you are, not as the version you shrink into just to stay mysterious. I get it. Rising from that fear is hard. Speaking when you feel vulnerable, that's real courage. Telling someone how you feel without knowing how they'll react, that's real strength. But staying silent to feel safe, that's survival. You didn't come here just to survive love. You came here to thrive in it. You came here to feel deeply, to express freely, to live honestly. Yes, sometimes silence is the answer, but only when it's rooted in clarity, not in fear, not in revenge, not in control. So if you've been using your silence to punish instead of protect, if you've been staging a performance instead of sitting in your truth, if you've been confusing calmness with coldness, it's time to make a new choice. Say it with me. My silence is for me. Write it in the comments. Let it sink in. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world. Stay with me because next, we're diving deeper into something even heavier. The kind of silence that doesn't feed your soul, but feeds your ego. That's where the scam really begins. Number 2, the silent treatment feeds your ego, not your soul. If your silence is about making them feel small, it's not strength, it's insecurity in disguise. Let that hit, not just in your head, but in your chest. We've all been there. We've all had moments where the silence wasn't sacred. It was strategic. It wasn't calm. It was calculated. Let's get real, my friends. Sometimes you don't go quiet because you're healed. You go quiet because your ego wants to win. You're not trying to find peace. You're trying to prove something. You're not seeking clarity. You're seeking control. And hey, I get it. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to uncover the truth. The ego is sneaky. It tells you to stay silent because that's how you stay powerful. But deep down, it's not power you're chasing. It's validation. You're hoping they check your profile. You're checking if they watched your story. You're posting indirect quotes, hoping they get the hint. You're scrolling through their page, pretending not to care while caring way too much. You don't want to be at peace. You want to be missed. Let me tell you something hard but healing. That's not stoicism. That's ego in a mask. True stoicism doesn't need to be seen to feel secure. It doesn't need applause to feel worthy. It doesn't play the look what you lost game. That's not inner mastery. That's emotional poker. When your silence is designed to make someone else feel less, it's not strength. It's a cry for attention dressed in a quiet costume. Here's a metaphor to make it real. Imagine you're holding a lantern. The flame is small, but it's yours. Instead of protecting it, nurturing it, and letting it grow, you turn off everyone else's lights, just so yours can shine brighter. That's what ego-driven silence does. You're not shining. You're just dimming everything around you and calling it power. True peace is when your light doesn't need anyone else's to go out. Let's take it a step deeper. You say, I'm just protecting my peace. But peace doesn't obsess over who texts first. Peace doesn't play mind games. Peace doesn't hit block just to watch from a burner account. Let's tell the truth here. You're not centered. You're spiraling quietly. You're not letting go. You're holding on through silence. You're not being stoic. You're being strategic. I get it. It hurts to be vulnerable. It's scary to speak your heart and not be heard. It's terrifying to say, hey, that bothered me, and risk them not caring. So the ego steps in and says, silence will protect you. Silence will make them pay. But what the ego never tells you is that while you're waiting for them to feel your absence, you're also starving yourself of emotional connection. You're locked in a game where no one wins. You don't get peace. They don't get clarity, and love drowns in all the unspoken noise. Marcus Aurelius said, a man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions. So ask yourself, what's your ambition when you go silent? Is it to reconnect with your inner calm, or is it to rattle someone else's soul? If it's the second one, you're not silent. You're scheming. You're not healing. You're hoping they break before you do. That's not your highest self talking. That's your wounded self fighting for validation. But here's the good news. You don't have to stay in that place. You can choose a silence that nourishes, not manipulates. A silence that restores your soul, not feeds your ego. It won't be easy because letting go of the ego's games feels like losing. But my friend, when you walk away from the game entirely, that's when you win. The person who doesn't need to be chased. The person who doesn't need attention to feel enough. The person who can sit in silence and still feel whole. That person is untouchable. So if you've been going quiet just to make someone notice you, if you've been performing peace while dying for a reaction, if you've been feeding your ego but starving your spirit, it's time to change direction. Say it with me. My silence feeds my soul. Write it in the comments. Let it sink in. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world. Next, we're going to talk about what happens when silence actually works. They come back. They reach out. But something inside the connection breaks. And that's when the game costs more than it ever gave you. Number 3, weaponized silence breaks trust, even when it wins attention. They came back, but do they trust you, or do they fear your silence? Let that sink in. not just in your mind, but deep in your chest. Yes, silence can be powerful. Yes, it can make them notice. Yes, it can pull them back. But what happens when they come back only because they're afraid of what your silence might mean? What happens when they stop feeling safe and start feeling watched, controlled, or tested? That's not a bond, that's a game. And eventually, the game breaks everything real between you. Let's be honest. Using silence as a weapon works for a little while. You go quiet and they chase you. You ignore and they panic. You pull away and they come running. At first, it feels like you've cracked the code, like you've found the cheat sheet to emotional control. But the more you do it, the more something subtle begins to shift. It's not just their behavior that changes, it's their trust. They start to wonder, will they go silent every time we have an issue? Do I have to walk on eggshells to keep them close? Once those questions take root in someone's heart, you're no longer building love, you're building fear. Imagine being in a relationship that feels like walking across a frozen lake. It looks peaceful from a distance, perfectly still, but every step feels risky. You don't know when it will crack. You don't know when the ice beneath you will give out. That's what weaponized silence does. It creates a surface that looks calm but feels dangerous. When people feel unsafe in your quiet, they stop trusting your presence. They don't know if you're pulling away to find peace or to punish them. True stoicism, real inner strength, is not about creating fear. It's about creating clarity. It's not about teaching someone to tiptoe around your silence, but inviting them into your stillness. Stoic silence is rooted in purpose, not punishment. It gives you space to breathe, to reflect, to reconnect with yourself. It's not supposed to be a trap. It's not supposed to be used as leverage. But when you turn silence into a strategy to control someone's emotions, you trade short-term attention for long-term damage. They might come back, but the way they look at you changes. Their guard goes up, their trust pulls back. You don't see it at first, but it's there. Every time you go quiet again, it digs deeper until eventually they stop reaching out. Not because they don't care, but because your silence doesn't feel safe anymore. I get it. Sometimes you don't know what to say. Sometimes your feelings are too loud to speak through, so you pull away. You think, I need space, and that's okay. Space is healthy. Silence is healthy, but only when it's real. Only when it's used for healing, not for control. When you use silence just to see if they'll chase you, if they'll break before you do, if they'll miss you enough to call, you're not reconnecting with your peace. You're feeding your power hunger. That kind of silence isn't wise. It's manipulative. Marcus Aurelius said, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. But let me add this. If your silence isn't rooted in truth, don't use it. Silence meant to cause confusion is just control with the volume turned down. It's passive aggression in prettier clothes. In dating, that kind of energy kills trust faster than any argument ever could. People need to feel safe in your presence and in your silence. If your quiet makes them feel punished, lost, or afraid to speak their truth, that's not strength, that's emotional instability. It doesn't matter how composed you look on the outside. If you're using silence to get a reaction, you're performing, not healing. You're controlling, not connecting. Here's the harsh truth. When people stop trusting your silence, they stop opening up to you. They stop sharing their feelings. They stop being vulnerable, not because they don't love you, but because they no longer feel safe doing so. Your silence has become a weapon, and they've learned to protect themselves from it. The emotional space between you starts to widen. The bond starts to thin out. One day, you'll look around and realize they're no longer afraid of losing you. They're afraid of being near you. So if you've been using silence to win, if you've been pulling away to punish, to prove a point, to trigger a chase, It's time to ask yourself what you're really building. A connection or a castle made of fear? Choose differently. Choose to speak, to clarify, to pause with purpose, not to punish with absence. Let your silence be real. Let it be rooted in reflection. Let it be something that helps you grow, not something that trains them to flinch. Say it with me. I choose clarity over control. Write it in the comments. Let it sink in. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world. Next, we're going to talk about the flip side. When your silence doesn't just hurt them, it starts to hurt you. When your own quiet turns into a prison, suffocating your heart instead of saving it, that one's coming next, and it's going to cut even deeper. Number 4, if it's hurting you too, it's not stoicism anymore. Silence meant to heal shouldn't feel like self-torture. Let's flip the script for a second, my friends. Up until now, we've been talking about how weaponized silence can hurt them. But what if the silence you're holding onto is actually hurting you? What if your quiet isn't peace? It's punishment, not for them, but for your own soul. Picture this. You're standing inside a soundproof room. No noise, no distractions, just silence. At first, it feels safe, controlled, still. But after a while, it starts to press in on you. The silence isn't soft anymore. It's loud, deafening, heavy. It becomes a weight on your chest. You start to feel it in your bones, not because anyone did anything to you, but because you chose not to speak when your heart needed air. That's what happens when we mistake self-sufficiency for strength. You miss them. You want to reach out. You replay the last conversation in your head 1,000 times. You stare at the message thread, thumb hovering over the keyboard, but you don't say a word. You're hoping they'll reach out first. You're hoping they'll break the silence because your pride is louder than your pain. You say, if they cared, they'd message me. But the truth is, you care and you're doing nothing about it. Not because you don't feel anything, but because you feel too much. Now you're trying to bury all of it in silence. That's not stoicism, that's self-abandonment. That's a lie you've been sold. Worse, a lie you're selling yourself. You told yourself silence would help you heal, but every day it hurts more. You're not becoming peaceful. You're becoming numb. You're not mastering your emotions. You're avoiding them. You're not getting stronger. You're just getting quieter. And that quiet is turning into chaos inside your own head. You think you're doing the right thing. You tell yourself this is what strong people do. But strength isn't staying silent when your heart is screaming. Strength isn't pretending not to care when your chest is. Damage. They might come back, but the way they look at you changes. Their guard goes up, their trust pulls back. You don't see it at first, but it's there. Every time you go quiet again, it digs deeper until eventually they stop reaching out. Not because they don't care, but because your silence doesn't feel safe anymore. I get it. Sometimes you don't know what to say. Sometimes your feelings are too loud to speak through, so you pull away. You think, I need space, and that's okay. Space is healthy. Silence is healthy, but only when it's real. Only when it's used for healing, not for control. When you use silence just to see if they'll chase you, if they'll break before you do, if they'll miss you enough to call, you're not reconnecting with your peace. You're feeding your power hunger. That kind of silence isn't wise. It's manipulative. Marcus Aurelius said, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. But let me add this. If your silence isn't rooted in truth, don't use it. Silence meant to cause confusion is just control with the volume turned down. It's passive aggression in prettier clothes. In dating, that kind of energy kills trust faster than any argument ever could. People need to feel safe in your presence and in your silence. If your quiet makes them feel punished, lost, or afraid to speak their truth, that's not strength, that's emotional instability. It doesn't matter how composed you look on the outside. If you're using silence to get a reaction, you're performing, not healing. You're controlling, not connecting. Here's the harsh truth. When people stop trusting your silence, they stop opening up to you. They stop sharing their feelings. They stop being vulnerable, not because they don't love you, but because they no longer feel safe doing so. Your silence has become a weapon, and they've learned to protect themselves from it. The emotional space between you starts to widen. The bond starts to thin out. One day, you'll look around and realize they're no longer afraid of losing you. They're afraid of being near you. So if you've been using silence to win, if you've been pulling away to punish, to prove a point, to trigger a chase, it's time to ask yourself what you're really building. A connection or a castle made of fear? Choose differently. Choose to speak, to clarify, to pause with purpose, not to punish with absence. Let your silence be real. Let it be rooted in reflection. Let it be something that helps you grow, not something that trains them to flinch. Say it with me. I choose clarity over control. Write it in the comments. Let it sink in. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world. Next, we're going to talk about the flip side. When your silence doesn't just hurt them, it starts to hurt you. When your own quiet turns into a prison, suffocating your heart instead of saving it, that one's coming next, and it's going to cut even deeper. Number 4, if it's hurting you too, it's not stoicism anymore. Silence meant to heal shouldn't feel like self-torture. Let's flip the script for a second, my friends. Up until now, we've been talking about how weaponized silence can hurt them. But what if the silence you're holding onto is actually hurting you? What if your quiet isn't peace? It's punishment, not for them, but for your own soul. Picture this. You're standing inside a soundproof room. No noise, no distractions, just silence. At first, it feels safe, controlled, still. But after a while, it starts to press in on you. The silence isn't soft anymore. It's loud, deafening, heavy. It becomes a weight on your chest. You start to feel it in your bones, not because anyone did anything to you, but because you chose not to speak when your heart needed air. That's what happens when we mistake self-sufficiency for strength. You miss them. You want to reach out. You replay the last conversation in your head 1,000 times. You stare at the message thread, thumb hovering over the keyboard, but you don't say a word. You're hoping they'll reach out first. You're hoping they'll break the silence because your pride is louder than your pain. You say, if they cared, they'd message me. But the truth is, you care and you're doing nothing about it. Not because you don't feel anything, but because you feel too much. Now you're trying to bury all of it in silence. That's not stoicism, that's self-abandonment. That's a lie you've been sold. Worse, a lie you're selling yourself. You told yourself silence would help you heal, but every day it hurts more. You're not becoming peaceful. You're becoming numb. You're not mastering your emotions. You're avoiding them. You're not getting stronger. You're just getting quieter. And that quiet is turning into chaos inside your own head. You think you're doing the right thing. You tell yourself this is what strong people do. But strength isn't staying silent when your heart is screaming. Strength isn't pretending not to care when your chest is aching. It's definitely not winning a pride game while losing your peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius never said, silence your emotions. He said, master your mind. Mastering your mind doesn't mean suffocating your feelings. It means understanding them, owning them, facing them with grace. Some of you have taken that silence and turned it into a prison. You're not free. You're stuck. You're not calm. You're disconnected. You're not stoic. You're scared. Scared to be the one who reaches out. Scared to say how you really feel. Scared to look weak. Scared they won't say it back. So you stay silent. You play the game. You hold your breath. Deep down, you're breaking. You scroll through your phone, you reread old messages, you replay memories like they're movies, and still you do nothing. Being the bigger person has become a shield you hide behind. But what if being the bigger person is actually keeping you small? Let me say this as clearly as I can. If your silence is suffocating you, it's not stoicism. If your silence is punishing you, it's not wisdom. If your silence is making you feel more disconnected, more confused, more hollow, that's not strength. That's suffering with the volume turned down. You can't heal in a space that keeps you disconnected from your own truth. You can't grow in silence if that silence is rooted in fear, not freedom. So if you're sitting there thinking, "But I can't break the silence, I'll look weak," ask yourself this: what's more important, looking strong or being whole? Because pretending not to care doesn't make the pain go away, it just buries it deeper. Eventually, it starts leaking out in other ways, through anxiety, anger, emotional shutdown. You'll find yourself in another relationship, carrying the same silence like a curse. But here's the good news: you don't have to live like that anymore. You can choose real strength. You can choose your peace over your pride. You can choose to reach out, not because you're desperate, but because you're honest. You can choose to speak, not because you're weak, but because your voice matters. So if you're sitting in silence that feels like suffering, if your quiet is louder than your heart can handle, it's time to break free. Say it with me: I choose peace over pride. Write it in the comments, let it sink in. Show them, show yourself, show the world. Next, we're talking about the true reason we go silent. Not for reflection, not for peace, but to rattle someone else's mind, to disturb their comfort, to keep them guessing. When silence is used to create chaos, that's where the manipulation begins. Number 5, silence is for inner order, not outer chaos. Go silent to restore your mind, not to disturb theirs. That's the truth, my friends. Raw, real, and long overdue. Silence was never meant to be a trap. It was never meant to be a weapon. But somewhere along the way, we stopped using it to find peace and started using it to play games. Let's set the record straight. Silence in its purest form is sacred. It's the moment you step back, not to disappear, but to realign. It's where you go when your thoughts are too loud, your heart too heavy, and your mouth too tempted to say things you'll regret. Real silence isn't about the other person. It's not about control. It's not about making them wonder. It's about order, inner order. Imagine, folks, you're standing in the middle of a messy room, clothes everywhere, dishes piling up. It's chaotic. You don't start yelling at the mess. You don't throw more things on the floor to make a point. What do? You stop, you pause, you clear a space, you breathe, you reset. That's what true silence is. It's cleaning up the emotional clutter inside you, not tossing that mess onto someone else's doorstep and waiting to see if they notice. But too many of us don't go silent to clean up. We go silent to cause confusion. We ghost, we ignore, we vanish without a word, and then we sit there pretending to be unbothered while secretly checking if they've texted or called. We tell ourselves we're being calm, but we're watching, waiting, playing. Let's be honest, that's not peace, that's performance. That's not stillness, that's strategy. Sure, strategy might get you a reaction. It might get them to chase, to check in, to ask what's wrong. But here's the part that'll punch you in the gut. It'll cost you your self-respect. Every time you choose manipulation over maturity, you teach yourself that games are safer than truth, that control is more powerful than connection. You're not growing, you're gambling. Marcus Aurelius didn't write, "Withdraw to win." He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That's what silence is for, a retreat, a return to you. Not a tool to make someone else unravel. But in dating, we flip that on its head. We say, "Watch me be quiet and let them feel it." We act like silence is a punishment to hand out whenever we feel disrespected, ignored, or insecure. That's not maturity. That's emotional outsourcing. You're trying to create chaos in them because you don't know how to calm what's in you. And let me tell you something real. It always backfires. Always. Because the moment someone realizes that your silence is meant to stir up guilt or fear, they don't feel closer to you. They feel played. They stop trusting your calm. They stop respecting your peace. They start thinking, are they really grounded, or are they just keeping score in silence? Once that thought is in someone's mind, the trust is cracked. The connection is unstable, and your silence doesn't feel safe anymore. It feels strategic. You can't build something real if every pause feels like a test. You can't create intimacy if every quiet moment is weaponized. You can't grow with someone if your silence is designed to disturb, not deepen. Let's bring it back to what silence is really for. It's for grounding, for sorting through the noise, for pausing instead of reacting, for healing instead of hurting. When you go silent for peace, it's stoic. When you go silent for punishment, it's petty. One brings you back to yourself. The other keeps you locked in a cycle of anxiety and control. Yes, it's tempting to use silence as a shortcut to attention, but what you win in reaction, you lose in respect. And once that respect is gone, it's hard to get it back. So if you've been going quiet just to watch them squirm, if you've been pretending to be fine while hoping they fall apart, if you've been using silence to disturb them instead of restore, it's time to choose differently. Say it with me. I choose peace, not power. Write it in the comments. Let it sink in. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world. Next, we're going even deeper into intention because silence might be quiet, but your reason for doing it, that intention, shouts. Number 6, silence isn't always loud, but your intention is. Silence can speak volumes, but your intention, that shouts. That line right there isn't just a quote, it's a mirror. Silence doesn't need a megaphone to be heard. It's already loud. What makes it dangerous or divine is the energy it carries, the intention behind it. Let's talk about that, my friends. Let's talk about energy. You don't need to scream at someone to shake the room. Sometimes all it takes is a pause, a quiet, a silence so thick it wraps around them like fog. But here's the thing. People don't just hear your words, they feel your silence. And the feeling, that's what makes or breaks a connection. Is it calm or is it cold? Is it grounded or is it punishing? Because those things are not the same. Imagine this. You're sitting across from someone at a dinner table. No one's talking, but it's not peaceful. It's tense. You're not sitting in presence, you're sitting in pressure. You feel like one wrong move, one wrong word, and the whole thing explodes. That's not peace. That's fear wearing silence as a disguise. That's the kind of silence that poisons the air. See, true stoic silence is rooted in presence. It's what you give to yourself when your emotions are too loud and your mind needs stillness. It's what you offer when you want to respond from clarity, not chaos. But when silence is fueled by punishment, control, or manipulation, it becomes something entirely different. Emotional landmines people are forced to tiptoe around. In dating, that emotional space between you, the silence, it matters more than the words. Because in that space, they're reading everything you don't say. They're feeling the weight of your pause. They're sensing the shift in your energy. They start to ask themselves, what does this silence mean? If they don't know, if the energy feels cold instead of calm, they stop trusting the silence. They stop trusting you. You're not being stoic, you're being unpredictable. And unpredictability doesn't build mystery, it builds insecurity. Nobody wants to love someone whose quiet feels like a threat. Nobody wants to connect with someone who uses silence like a punishment. Nobody feels safe when the person they care about shuts down instead of opens up. It's not about what you're doing, it's about why you're doing it. Here's a truth that stings. Silence used without emotional responsibility is just quiet chaos. You think you're being composed, but if your silence is fueled by hurt, anger, or pride, that energy leaks and people feel it. They might not say it, they might not know how to name it, but they feel it. And it makes them question everything. Once someone starts questioning your energy, they start pulling back. Not because they don't care, but because they don't feel safe showing up anymore. They don't know what your silence means, so they start to assume the worst. That you're angry, that you're testing them, that you're done. Here's the heartbreaking part. Sometimes your silence isn't meant to punish. Sometimes you're just overwhelmed, just trying to process, just trying to protect yourself. But because you never explain your silence, because your energy shifts without clarity, they take it as rejection, as coldness, as emotional shutdown. Now, the very thing you use to protect your connection is what's killing it. So what do? You get intentional. You get honest with yourself. Ask yourself, why am I going quiet right now? Is it because I need peace or because I want to make them feel what I'm too afraid to say out loud? If it's peace, you're good. But if it's punishment, that's a signal to pause, reflect, and recalibrate. Real strength isn't in going silent to create confusion. It's in going silent to create clarity within yourself first. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." So what are you thinking when you go quiet? Are your thoughts focused on healing or hurting, on restoring or reacting? Because intention always shows, even when you say nothing at all. So if your silence has been causing tension instead of peace, if it's been making them feel unsafe instead of seen, if it's been unpredictable instead of grounding, it's time to shift. Say it with me. My silence carries peace. Write it in the comments. Let it sink in. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world. Next, we're about to talk about the real difference between silence that reflects and silence that rattles. When you're quiet, it's not about getting still. It's about getting a reaction. And that, my friends, is where silence turns into a scam. Number 7, don't use silence to get a reaction. Use it to get reflection. If silence is a mirror, it should show you, not just reflect them. That one hits deep, my friends, because the truth is too many people go quiet not to find peace, but to get a reaction. You're not pulling back to reflect. You're pulling back to provoke. You're not sitting in stillness. You're sitting in strategy. You're waiting, watching, wondering, will they notice? Will they call? Will they chase? But that's not reflection. That's avoidance. Silence should never be a trap for someone else's emotions. It should be a space for your own. A sacred pause to ask, what do I feel? What do I need? What am I running from? Because if you're using silence to test them, to time their reply, to see if they crack before you do, then you're not healing. You're hiding. You're not being strong. You're avoiding the hard conversation. So ask yourself today, is my silence helping me return to myself? Or is it just a game I hope they lose? Say it with me. I choose reflection over reaction. Write it in the comments. Let it sink in. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world. And here's the final truth. Real stoic silence heals you. And that's why it impacts them. Let your silence be your sanctuary, not your strategy. In dating, silence does have power. It makes them reflect. It makes them wonder. It shifts the energy. But here's the twist. They only feel the weight of it when it's real, when it's not a tactic but a truth, when your silence isn't about punishing them but about protecting you. See, when your quiet is rooted in self-respect, it carries depth. It says, I'm not here to play games. I'm here to preserve my peace. That kind of silence doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to control. It simply is. Ironically, that's what impacts them the most. But if your silence is a setup, if it's just to trigger a reaction, to test how much they care, to see if they'll come crawling back, that's not stoicism, that's performance. That's the scam. You don't need to fake strength to feel powerful. You don't need to disappear to prove your value. You just need to mean it when you go silent. So don't go quiet to manipulate. Go quiet to heal. And when you do, everything shifts for real. Say it with me. My silence is my power. Write it in the comments, let it sink in. Show them, show yourself, show the world. Now let's bring it all together, my friends. Silence isn't the scam. Manipulative silence is. Real stoic silence heals you. It grounds you. It brings you back to you. But when silence is used to punish, control, or provoke, it loses its power and poisons the connection. Use your silence as a sanctuary, not a strategy. If this spoke to your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this truth today. I'll see you in the next one.